Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. I am Reverend Grenetta Mason, aka Reverend G. And I'm here with you every Monday night on WEMS Radio Live, bringing you conversation with guests from all walks of life with different perspectives. And we come together and we share our experiences in hopes that in sharing our experience, you can learn something from what we've done. Our goal is to touch, move, and inspire you. So, my guests, we talk about life, we talk about love, and we talk about spirituality. And we talk about spirituality from a practical point of view. How does it support you in your everyday life? What spiritual practices are your go to practices? I talk about the spiritual toolkit, and the spiritual toolkit are those practices that you have that are personal to you. We all have our go to things that we do. So it's nice when we can talk about what those things are. We can share them. And as I've done this show, it's like 2 years already. And there are just so many different practices that my guests share. The goal here is to support you in finding joy and living your best life. And as I say, with grace and ease. You can find me every day on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason with inspirational messages, and I'm also on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. Tonight, I have a very special guest, Stephen Turner, and Stephen is the president of Stephen Turner Inc. So I'm gonna have Stephen come in, and we're gonna chat with you tonight about a variety of different things. Hey, Stephen.
Hello, Granetta. How are you?
I am great. How are you?
Oh, I'm so happy to be here with you. It's,
Yep, I'm happy to have you here too. I always introduce people with their titles and then I say, well, introduce yourself and, then we'll talk about some of the things that you're doing. So introduce yourself however you want.
okay. Well, the way I introduce myself in most settings in work life are as the president of a small green building consulting firm in Providence, Rhode Island. And we work with colleges and universities and other clients who are building large buildings and want to make them sustainable or green buildings. And we work with them on the technical side of these building projects and help them get what they're paying for in these very large capital projects that they're doing with respect to environmental performance. So it's kind of a specialty niche consulting practice, and we're really lucky because we get to work on a lot of really exciting projects, leading edge projects in New England, and it feels good to do that work. It's rewarding. Uh, yeah, and then sometimes I introduce myself as uh, Steve, a recovering addict. So
Mm.
that's a
Yeah,
different crew. That's in a different circle. So
right.
you know,
Okay.
but I feel like I can be my whole self with you. I don't have to hide one part or the other. So
No, and we'll get to talk about Steve and we'll get to talk about Steven, right? We'll get
yeah,
to talk about each one, right? Because it's interesting when you talk about green buildings, sustainable, talk more about. Um, so, what came to mind for me is how often are you called on at this point to create green buildings or refurbish them, because as you said, it's like a niche market. How big is that? And are you seeing it growing in any way?
yes, I've, I've been really fortunate. I started the business in 2009, and at that time it was me with my laptop computer in my basement,
Mhm.
just trying to hustle,
Mhm.
and today we own a office building in Providence, and there's 12 of us, and we didn't have to lay anybody off all through COVID. We kept people on, and that feels really good.
Mhm.
And we work at any given time. We have about somewhere between 50 and 75 projects going on. Uh, so some of them are large, some of them are small. Uh, but with that many projects in the mix, there's always different kinds of exciting projects going on all at once. And it's really gratifying to see the demand for these kinds of services. When
Mhm.
I worked in energy conservation early in my career, and I couldn't get arrested. People
Mhm.
just were not interested. I was
Mhm.
that I was that weirdo, you know, with those crazy ideas about energy conservation, and now people beat a path to my door, and this is something that people know we need. And of course, uh, I wish I were busier, because then we'd be trashing the planet a
Mm.
little less quickly.
Yes.
So,
Right.
um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but it's interesting.
Mm. Yeah, because when I think about it, at a point there was a lot of talk about green, everybody going green, the impact on the planet, and so it's like, what's a typical project for you though in this whole space of building? So you create buildings and you create spaces that are energy efficient.
Yeah,
And
so a typical engagement for us is as part of a big team, a
okay.
lot of different specialists working
Mhm.
on a big project for a significant client. So we do work for Brown University, MIT, Harvard University, City of Cambridge. Cambridge, we're doing very interesting projects all the time with Cambridge. Uh, we are working on the third school that we've done with them in terms of brand new construction, and each school gets more and more sustainable. And
Mhm.
these are very large buildings. So the
Mhm.
last one we did was, sort of hundreds of thousands of square feet. It was a public library and a school district administration headquarters, and a large school and a community center, a huge complex.
Mhm.
And the entire project is carpeted with solar panels. All of the grounds were drilled for geothermal wells, and the building systems were very high tech and all electric. So there's no boiler in the basement burning
Mhm.
oil or
Mhm.
gas,
Mhm.
and basically the intent of the city is to build these schools in such a way that they generate as much power as they use. So
Mhm.
they're connected to the grid because they don't always make all the electricity they need at any given moment in time.
Mhm.
But over the course of the year, if you add up all the electricity the buildings use, and then you subtract all the electricity the buildings generate from the solar panels on them, you get to zero. And that's what we call a net zero building. And what it means is that building isn't, over the course of a year, is producing as much power as it uses. So it's not contributing to pollution and
Mhm.
requiring as much electrical infrastructure as a traditional building that just sucked up electricity and burned a bunch of oil or gas in the basement and sent a
Mhm.
bunch of emissions up the stack. And yeah, so um, this is this is not the high school I went to. These are
Mm.
These are
Mhm.
different buildings, very beautiful buildings, a lot of glass, very spacious and airy, good views, very comfortable,
Mhm.
um, with a lot of high tech systems in them. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And your own home is solar panel, the one you built?
Yes, and my own home is a step beyond net zero. I just described how some buildings are producing as much electricity as they use. Well,
Mm-hmm.
mine has to, because it's not
Mm.
connected to anything.
Oh, okay, okay.
There's no electric meter on my house. There's no gas pipe coming into my house. There's no gas tank. There's no oil tank. There's solar panels on the roof, and there's high capacity batteries in the basement. And the solar panels charge the batteries, and the batteries run the house. And the batteries are big enough so that if it's stormy for 3 or 4 days in a row, we can still make it through. And um, yeah, it's so that's a completely off-grid house, but it's a different kind of off-grid. I'm sitting in the basement now, which is not finished, but upstairs is a beautiful, uh, modern sort of interior home that you would never think of as an off-grid. When you say off-grid to me, sometimes I think, oh well, that's hippies living in a cave or something. What does that
Got it.
mean? But this is, again, it's a different kind um, of building that's possible today with what we have available. And yeah, it was important to me to build my own home, or to have my own home built to be off grid for a couple of reasons. And one is philosophically, uh, I felt it was important to do. Why talk the talk and charge my clients to show them how to do what I do all day long, and then go home at night and sleep in a conventional house? That's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for alignment and my own internal peace, it was important to do. And the other thing is just technically, I'm an engineer. I understand this stuff. I apprenticed in the trades when I was younger. I worked with my hands for the first 10 years of my life, of my working career. And so I can do this. Not everybody would feel comfortable with it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's off the grid. What if it breaks? What if the batteries fail? What if the solar panels fail? What do you do? And
You've been around it. So, is there a difference between the winter and the summer?
yes, great question. Yeah. There's a huge difference because in the summertime, one of the beautiful things about living in this house is how attuned to natural cycles I
Mm-hmm.
get. So late in June, there's the summer solstice.
Mm-hmm.
And, often if we're in touch with people who are into astrology or other uh, ideas, we hear, oh, the summer solstice, the summer solstice. But when we're living in a city, we just know, well, it's it's hot when that happens.
Right.
Um, well, there's also um, the December, the winter solstice, which is the time, Christian tradition has its big holiday. Every major tradition has big holidays around these significant solar events. And so the end of June, I get the most sun. And the end of
Mm-hmm.
December, I get the least sun. And
Okay.
in between, it's going back and forth between those two extremes. So
Mm-hmm.
in late June, if it's a clear day, I could charge my batteries in an hour in the morning and have
Okay.
all the power I need
Mm-hmm.
for a couple of days. And I can run around the house
Mm-hmm.
actually turning things on because it's solar power, it's clean power. I'm not hurting anything by using it. It's very interesting. But in the
Mm-hmm.
winter, man, you know, I got to watch the electricity use like a hawk to make it through those December
Mm-hmm.
days, because if it gets cloudy, there's a big winter storm. But what makes it work for me is that I'm lucky I live in a place where there's lots of um, forest, and so
Okay.
I burn wood in the winter to help the batteries last when the sun isn't.
Mm.
So if I get a cloudy week, uh, you know, we fire up the wood stove here, and this December was really cloudy, and we got
Mhm.
very little sun, and we had to use the wood stove basically nonstop during that time period. And now this time of year, with everything warming up and the sun being out recently, uh, all that pressure is off of me. So that's a real difference from time of year to time of year.
Yeah, and there it's not, you don't get to store it up.
Well, we do have batteries,
Okay.
but they are the most expensive part of my house.
Mm-hmm.
So on top of the normal expense of building a house, on top of buying the solar panels, I bought batteries, and this was completed 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, they were the single most important or expensive, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
element of the house, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they have now fallen in price by
Mm-hmm.
half.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
Is that like what, depreciation or more people, more demand? Well,
exactly, it's Moore's law. It's like
mm-hmm.
double the capacity, half the
Mm-hmm.
size, half the price. Um, and with the scaling up of electric vehicles and of home, like the Tesla Powerwall,
Mm-hmm.
as an example, I have a different kind of battery with a uh, very similar technology, but the state of the art batteries. So if I were to
Mm-hmm.
build my house today, I might actually have even bigger batteries in. For that same
Mm-hmm.
money, I could have gotten more batteries, and
Mm-hmm.
then there would be less pressure on me in the wintertime because I'd be able to store more
Oh.
power and get through a
Mm-hmm.
longer, cold, cloudy period.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the kinds of lessons that, somebody's got to come out here and learn them.
Right.
And
And you have, and I mean, it's not a huge place, it's a nice size, place that you have. It's enough space, but we're not talking about 3 bedrooms or anything like that. It's a nice, comfortable space.
yeah, so
That's really cool about the wood burning, because I wouldn't have thought that that would be the option, right? Uh,
yes, well, it's much discussed in sustainability circles,
mm,
because when we burn wood, of course, we are releasing carbon into the atmosphere. But when you live in a forested area,
okay.
there is wood falling down in the forest or wood that needs to be cleared in order for new trees to grow. And the
Mm,
new trees capture carbon. And so the idea is that the cycle of the forest is, if you will, symbiotic for us to be in that circle with the
mm,
forest. And by helping to make room for those new trees to grow, which will capture carbon, that is thought by some people to kind of offset the carbon that's released by the burning of the wood. Now,
mhm. Okay. Mhm.
someday I would imagine I'll have so much battery that I won't have to burn any wood to heat my house.
Uh, mhm.
I might
Okay.
have to burn some wood to burn some food to eat, but
Right.
yeah,
But not for heating.
right.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's the goal, right? To
Yes.
get there, right? So that's pretty interesting, because as I was saying earlier, some things you don't think about. And this, I would not just think about as a part of all the things I can think about, right? And to bring awareness to the importance of us coming up with energy efficient buildings and sustainable buildings is something important. So I'm happy that you're talking about it, and I would say, like, um, where do you see it going in terms of like mass? Like, will we all eventually move into this? But it's as I say, my mind goes, "What, Janetta, right?"
Hmm.
uh, because I just thought about all the buildings that are already there and how do we renew all of them, and then we go in and just create this new system. And it brings to mind for me also when we talk about climate control and the impact on the planet, and how do we bring all these systems together to support
Mm.
clean air, I would just say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's what's so exciting about life, right? We don't know what the future will bring, but you put your finger right on some of the key issues in, uh, you know, uh, managing down the human impact on the planet. And we like to say we're living in the Anthropocene era, which is the era defined by humans' impact on the planet.
mm, mm,
For the first time, we are really defining what the planet can be because of the impact of our activities. And sadly, at this point, we're defining down what the planet can
mm, mm,
be.
mm,
And the biggest single contributor um, really is buildings.
mm,
40% of our energy goes into buildings.
yeah.
And of course, the problem, as you so appropriately said, is it's all those existing buildings. They're already built. They're already sitting there.
Yeah.
It's like if you went out on the highway and every car was like a 1957 Impala with a straight six engine and no catalytic converter and just dumping pollution out the back.
Yeah.
That's what our buildings are like. They're like, it's
Mhm.
it's really amazing that we consider ourselves modern, sophisticated people, and yet we live in buildings, I mean, many of which are little changed since
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
with respect to the energy produced using systems.
Right.
Um, so we don't quite know how things will change, but one vision of it is you hear about the smart grid or electrification or decarbonization of the grid. And
Mhm.
all of this is uh, movement around, well, gosh, okay, if we've got all these buildings and they're connected to the electric grid, well, at least we can try to clean up the power plants that generate the electricity,
Mhm.
manage
Mhm.
down the impacts of buildings that way.
Mhm.
Um, and, um, partly because I'm fortunate enough to be in this arena and thinking, engaging with it every day. Um, I'm kind of a gadfly. So I,
Mm.
I really believe in uh, a, a different vision of the future where people take more personal control of their energy supply.
Mhm.
So um, I just uh, I just needed to get a new backpack for work.
Mhm.
I bought one with a little solar panel sewn right into the back of it and a little battery built right into it.
Mhm.
And uh, when you go to buy a car today, you can buy an electric car with a battery in it.
Mhm.
And if you extrapolate those couple of data points out, maybe there's a future where uh, the roof of the house is just naturally photovoltaic. It's producing
Mhm.
electricity.
Mhm.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe the sidewalks are solar. Oh, wait, they already did that in the Netherlands. They paved the bike
Mhm.
paths with solar panels. You
Mhm.
ride your bike, you're riding on solar panels, and they just lie there on the ground generating power all day. Maybe we would live in a world where all around us would be little miniature solar powers,
Mhm.
embedded into our lives so that we wouldn't run around like looking for our charger and our wall plug when our phone is dead. It would never go dead because we just put it in our pocket and our jacket would charge it up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I like to think of a future where people have more, and I call that, instead of the model that we have now, is the big power grid model. You know, everybody's, except a few off-grid houses like mine, are plugged into the big grid. I like to think of this alternate future as the nano grid, where we just take that grid, we just shrink it down. It becomes personal. Like, I got my personal grid. I got my car, I got my house, I got my backpack, my jacket, my hat. Everything about
All on your
me
own.
is,
Yeah.
making some power. So my phone never runs dead. I never have to plug it in. My laptop never goes down because it's just charging when it's in my backpack. And my car never dies because it's all covered with solar too. And my house is the same way. And maybe my head is the same way. I'm just wearing a hat that's got solar. I don't know,
So, yeah.
So, but the future lies
It
somewhere in
sounds like an exciting. It sounds like an exciting new world.
well,
Right?
that's,
To think
yeah.
about.
And that's a little far out, what I'm
Yeah.
describing. The mainstream of thought is focused on trying to add, offshore wind, large scale solar farms, alternate renewable energy sources to the big power grid that already exists. But the problem with the big power grid is that it loses half the power you put into it between the power plant and your house. 50%. And that's really
Wow.
bad losses.
Mm,
Engineers, we like to think about efficiency, and 50% efficient is not a good number. So to
no.
me, the big grid is a kind of an inherently flawed model, and it's what people are used to. It's more conventional. It's easier to think about a future with a clean, smart grid. But I like to think about, well, you know me, I'm a little off the wall anyway. I like to think about alternatives. So
Yes, absolutely, and having a marriage, and you're already off the grid, right? That's how I would say now.
yeah,
With the way you're living and where most of us aren't even aware. That's the thing with me. It's like creating this awareness is always important. I always talk about what we don't know, and we don't even know what we don't know. That old
yeah,
thing, right?
yeah.
So, really, it's about awareness, and that's the when I talk about spirituality and how you're living your life. It's to just bring awareness around just living a life of, I would say, finding that joy and finding that peace, and as life happens to us and as we go through it, there's so many different changes that we go through that I think that having the spiritual place could support us. So let's talk about Steve, the recovering addict. We're going to move from Stephen to Steve, right?
Okay.
Uh,
Sounds good.
I think I know it's been like 35 years you've been on this whole recovery. Give us some little history on that and
Mm,
what it's.
yes. Well, uh, I, we could book a year-long series of shows, and I could tell you like all the nitty-gritty details. Uh, and but essentially, what started out as a lot of fun for me, partying and, you know, being a big freak and hanging out at the fountain in Central Park and, waving the freak flag high and all that stuff that we thought was so cool. Well, the fun stopped, but I kept on getting high long after the fun stopped. And by the mid 80s, long after the fun had stopped, I couldn't stop getting high. And it was really making making my life just a living hell, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And just got to the point where my parents wouldn't help me, my friends wouldn't talk with me. I didn't have friends anymore. People who had been my friends wouldn't talk to me. Um, yeah, I was in a very bad place. You know, if you loved me, I hurt you. If you trusted me, I stole from you. And if you listened to me, I lied to you.
Mm-hmm.
That was that was where I had gotten to.
Mm-hmm.
And an amazing moment of grace happened when yeah, I said I'm going out to the store for cigarettes, and I came back 3 days later. I'd been in the crack house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that person handed me the phone and said, "Here, talk to these people." And it was the hotline of a 12-step recovery program, a group of addicts helping themselves recover. And I found my way into the rooms of recovery, where people who talked like me and looked like me. They smelled a little better than me at that point, but
Mm-hmm.
people I could identify with were there, putting one foot in front of the other and putting their lives back together. And it was really magic thing. I don't want to go too far into details. Uh, just to honor the principles of these 12-step programs themselves, where anonymity is the spiritual foundation of these programs. So I don't want to go too far into details, but I do want to just say that there were many moments of grace in the early going, and this January 1st, 1986 was the first day of my new life. And ever since, I've been able to live, clean and in recovery. And the gifts, I described how desperate a person I had become, really the nightmare of the man I wanted to be. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
opposite. The gifts have been even more dramatic, than the losses of active addiction. Recovery is just given me so many beautiful new chapters of life, and continues right to this day. And you said something when you asked me this question. You said, how do you live? How do you access happiness and joy? And uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's really I heard something in these programs of recovery, that if I stuck around, uh, I would be able to access daily life happy, joyous, and free from the stigma of being an addict. You know,
That's the big, yeah.
yeah, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
cool, in 1985
Mm-hmm.
to be moping around New York, with burn marks on your fingers and you know doing the shuffle. Everybody knew what was up. And there was a real
Exactly.
stigma to that. It was like I was less than, and I felt
Mm-hmm.
less than. And
And you were doing it to yourself. We really beat ourselves up more than anything else, right? And that feeling that you were doing it to yourself, feeling less than. And I remember I was in New York during the time, and it was all around. And I used to say anybody could get hooked on drugs, right? Anybody, just don't take the first. I just keep remembering, don't do it at all, right? So that you don't go down that road, right?
yeah,
But
was that
it was
realistic?
that's
Not for
wasn't
me, it
religious.
wasn't. I
It's
had to
all
go
like
there.
there by the grace of God go I always say, right?
Yeah.
Because we all experimented with everything, and I can say too, and I'm just so grateful that I never. But I saw a lot of friends go down that road, and I used to say that drug did not discriminate against anybody. I don't care how much money you had. I don't care what color you were. I don't care how old you were. Nothing. If you started to do drugs, it didn't matter. All your money would go. You could have no money or a ton of money, right?
Yeah.
It
That's an
just
equal opportunity disease right there.
it was totally equal opportunity, no
Yeah.
discrimination against anybody. And I saw friends go down, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like,
And you're
you
right, it was
know,
everywhere. It was crazy. You know what I had to do to get clean? I had to take a job working for a friend, uh, so he wouldn't pay me. Okay, and he held my
mm-hmm.
money for me, and he would
Mm,
and he would give me $9 a day, and I had to move. Okay, I lived in Manhattan forever at that point. I had to move to
mm-hmm.
Staten Island, and he
Wow.
he he gave me $9 a day so I could buy a sandwich or a, because if he gave me $10, I would have put that $10 bill in my teeth and I would have swum to Washington Heights from Staten Island.
Mm,
I mean, it's
mm-hmm,
like, if I had subway fare and a 10 spot, that's all it took in those days. But the beautiful thing was that when I first got clean, Manhattan was a landscape of fear. It was like every
mm-hmm,
place I turned, it was like, oh, that's where that dealer lives, or oh, that's where that
mm-hmm,
nicotine is.
mm-hmm,
And over the following years in recovery, it became a landscape of hope. It was beautiful. It was like, oh yeah, my first sponsor used to live over there. Oh, over there, that's
mm-hmm,
the church I went to my first meeting in, and oh,
mm-hmm,
that's where so and so used to live. And we all had cool names in those days. It was like
mm-hmm.
Freemason Frank and Heroin Harry.
Right.
But there was this one guy. He I was so messed up in those days. I got clean because of a leather coat. I swear.
Wow.
Remember Serpico, the movie? They had like this leather trench coat look going on back in the day in New York.
Yeah.
Well, there was this cat who used to come around the meetings. I'm not going to say his name, but he wore this coat, and it was fresh. I wanted that coat, and my best understanding of it was, well, if you stick around and you stay clean, then you can get
But,
that coat. And there were some times, and that's what kept me going. I was so confused in those days, and slowly the fog healed, and the fog lifted, and my heart started to heal, and I went on this really deep, beautiful journey about love, because when I found the rooms of recovery, people told me that they would love me until I learned how to love myself. So I figured, well, I better learn how to love myself, because I don't know how long these people are going to put up with me. I might wear out my welcome here, and I might need those skills. And I really knew nothing. I could feel nothing about love. I didn't know how to love. I didn't know what love felt like. I didn't know what the word meant. I used to sit and think, well, a son should be able to feel his mother's love.
Yeah.
And I'd meditate on that, and I'd get nothing. So that tells you, how kind of like far off the path for how long I had been. I was really out there.
What
Um,
about so I guess I'm a fast forward now. What is love like today though?
so
Going through that transition to not knowing what it felt
great.
like today.
That's a great prompt. So um, it looks today like what I learned with my mother about love, because I went after my mom, and I said, I'm going to learn how to love this woman. I'm going to learn what love feels in this relationship with my mother. And I started visiting her and grabbing a hold of her and hugging her. And she'd be like all up. She wasn't a hugger, you know, she'd be like, oh.
Mm.
And then years went by and she'd be embracing me and comfortable in the hug. And we talk about our relationship and our love for one another. And by the time she died, just before COVID time started, we had been on this beautiful journey. And, you know, I said at her funeral, I said, my mom taught me that love is a verb.
Mm.
Love is action. You know, love is a funny word because you can be used as a noun
Mm-hmm.
or it can be used as a verb.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom showed me love in action. And so that's given me the jumping off point to um, join in my relationships and especially uh, my love relationship
Mm-hmm.
with that new perspective, that new confidence, that knowledge. What does what does love really feel like? You know, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if I'm if I'm moved to action to make my beloved's day the best day it can possibly be, I
Mm.
know I'm in love.
Mm.
I'm in love. That you know, I didn't know those kinds of things when I started this journey, and to discover them has opened this whole landscape of the heart to me, and
Mm-hmm.
has given me like whole new continents of emotion to enjoy and pursue and observe and feel. And um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that um, um, you know, there have been two great healing forces in my life. One has been um, you know, God
Mm.
kept me around
Mm.
when I was trying to take myself out, and my disease
Mhm.
was trying to take me out.
Mhm.
And so that made me available to be healed. And then, you know, love, the love of my fellow addicts in recovery, the love of my parents, the love of my children, my love for my children, you know,
Mhm.
my love for my beloved's love for me,
Mhm.
partnership in love.
Mhm.
And
Somebody, John said on here, "Love is hope,"
mm,
and that's pretty cool. Yeah.
I think that's really deep because, you know, I came when I bottomed out in my addiction, I didn't have hope
Mm.
and I didn't know love. And,
Mm.
you know, uh, it's like it's a long way from the crack house to the off-grid house, you know.
Mm.
There's a lot of love and a lot of hope in in the home I live in today. And it wasn't always that way. So love is hope. I love that. That's
Yeah.
really awesome. There's some
It's
beautiful remarks coming in from the listeners, and I really want to just acknowledge how beautiful it is to see these thoughts that you're sharing with us. They come up on the
mhm.
screen as we're talking, and it's very
Yeah.
heartwarming.
Yeah, beautiful. I have two more things. I want to talk about how I know you're a musician, I know you're in a band, how music has influenced your life, but I also want to talk about your spiritual journey.
Mm.
And so, we got to get a lot in right now.
Yeah, good.
Your spiritual journey and you as we talked about love, in the whole journey through recovery, I'm sure that was a part of your whole spiritual journey with the healing. Did you grow up in the church? Are you Catholic or what?
Um, I was baptized in the same little church where my mom's ashes are in the flower garden outside the church in my
Mm.
hometown. Um, I was uh, I was paid to go to church when I was a kid. I was a professional boy soprano in New York City. So
Okay.
from the age of when I was 5, I went to work at Trinity Church on Wall Street, singing as a boy soprano, and
Mm.
Then when I was 7, I moved to a different church, which was at that time, the top-notch boys choir in New York. So from that moment on until my voice changed, I got paid to be in church, which was a
Mm,
very distorting kind of weird experience to have,
mm, mm, mm,
if that hadn't happened, I would say, my parents had faith. I think, um, in retrospect, I trust my mother's faith. What she had felt
mm,
real to me,
mm,
Um,
mhm,
but my father was a weird guy, not a good man, but he adopted a lot of the trappings of a church man. I think,
mm,
you know,
mm.
to kind of cloak his defects. So that was a little weird too. So I had like a really weird kind of childhood experience with the church per se.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, and once I stopped getting paid to go to church, I stopped going to church.
mhm,
Um, and then I went to these weird private schools as a scholarship kid that were
mhm,
Episcopal schools,
mhm,
So there was it was mandatory church,
mm.
And that's a very normal part of childhood, right? Like
Yeah, I guess.
a lot of us go through that phase of like, well, you know,
You have to go.
you got to go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and, um,
What
and
would you say are your practices now after all like the weirdness of being paid and the
mm,
life and I know I learned for me the 12-step program was a wake-up call for me because I knew nothing about it, but I had a lot of people in my seminary that had gone through the program. So
mm,
it was introduced to me then. So I know that's a whole spiritual journey also going through that. With
yeah.
all of that, where are you today in your spirituality?
Mm. Well, I like to say I'm a syncretist. Syncretist. Like I
Okay.
synthesize what appeals to me from different traditions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so first and foremost, recovery is a spiritual program. That's the whole ball of wax.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was like lightweight seminary for Steve was going
Mm-hmm.
to meetings and contemplating, like, for example, the hierarchy of my relationships. Like, number one has to be my relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
That allows me to have the second most important relationship in my life, which is my relationship with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I get to have all the other relationships that I want,
Mm-hmm.
but those are foundational. And that was, I had a very significant spiritual awakening after, the drugs started to clear out of my system. And that part of it was, I had a really um, uh, bad motorcycle accident when I was a drunken teenager.
Mm-hmm.
My my best thinking, right? Yeah, let's drink a quarter Jack Daniels and then get on a motorcycle and go riding. With predictable results, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, I thought like, oh well, God looks out for the heavy user, or wasn't I lucky, or crazy stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I got into recovery that I was, oh, I am here for a reason, and I had not fulfilled my reason, and God
Mm-hmm.
reached down and said,
No.
you dumb poor little kid, you you're trying to do your best to take yourself out, but I'm not done with you yet. So,
Mm.
and that was very powerful, really, really hit me. And then other ideas that really appeal to me. For example, I love the way Quakers meet
Mhm. Mhm.
and think.
Mhm.
Um, I love uh, uh, the music and worship of the Black American churches. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and had the good fortune to be able to play some music in those settings and have some really deep spiritual experiences along the way. I love the way that uh, Buddhists think about the end of
Mhm.
this phase of life.
Mhm.
And, I say that I was with my mother on her deathbed when she drew her last breath. She was in my arms, and I'd like to say I was Buddhist for her.
Mm.
I just wanted
Mhm.
her to be peaceful.
Mhm.
Hospice was saying, well, we may have to give her morphine. She may become distressed. And, I just really wanted her not to have to take any medicine. She hadn't been to a doctor for 14 years when she died.
Mhm.
She didn't like aspirin or any drugs at all. And I know she valued her peace. I just wanted her to be at peace in a natural way. And so um, I love that kind of thinking. Uh,
Mhm.
I love the Orthodox Christian traditions.
Mhm.
Um, yesterday was Orthodox Easter, and especially uh, just the arc, the directness of the connection back to Christ.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, I had like a deep experience in a two churches in Istanbul once
Mhm.
because I looked at a mosaic in one church of Jesus,
Mhm.
and I said, well, wait, he doesn't look like Willem Dafoe. Hollywood
Mhm.
has it all wrong.
Mhm.
So I made a note of what his face looked like, and then I went across the city to another ancient church.
Mhm.
Places had been built in 400 or 500 AD,
Mhm.
and there was a image of Christ on the ceiling, the fresco, and it was the same face. So these artworks had been rendered at a time when there was still a living tradition of who this man was and what he,
Mhm.
and that was
Mhm.
like boom.
Mhm.
So I love that directness of the Orthodox churches, um, and I I don't get uptight about mixing and mashing up different ideas from different traditions. It's like
Mhm.
uh,
Exactly. I like that idea too because I studied all the different religions and I can take something great from each one, right? That supports me in living my spiritual life, right?
mm,
And as we talk, what would you say would be your top three spiritual practices? I talk about the spiritual toolkit, so we get to share. What would be your top three practices that are your go-to in your toolkit?
mm, well, um, meetings, 12,
Meetings.
12-step meetings.
Oh, okay, okay. Meeting. Okay.
Um,
You still go to meetings after 36 years?
yeah,
Wow.
there's a beautiful meeting. I had there have been times when I stopped going. Now,
Okay.
10 and 20 years ago, when I would stop going, I would need to go back.
Mm,
And I would always say when I went back to a meeting, I said, "Oh man, I feel like I dodged a bullet. It's been, 7 months since I was at a meeting. Uh,
Mm.
I don't feel that absence in a painful way, but a beautiful thing has happened during COVID. There's a wonderful outdoor meeting
Mm.
near me once a week, and
Oh, okay.
I was able to go to this meeting in person all through COVID. And it's a beautiful spot and an amazing setting and a beautiful group of people. And um, it's become a really strong contributor to my spiritual health is uh, make that regularly. The I was born on an island. The water, being on the water,
Mm.
water.
Mm.
Uh, that's sort of that's those waves. It feels like rocking the cradle to me.
Mm. Yeah.
Mother Ocean.
Yeah.
Um, in the warm weather, when it's quiet,
Mm.
um, I can hear the waves breaking on the beach as I go to sleep. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, so the ocean is an important part,
Mm.
and being surrounded with people who have their own strong spiritual practices.
Mm.
For example, my beloved is strong with meditation, with her own spiritual practices,
Mm.
and yeah, that's beautiful and supportive. There have been times in the past when I've been sort of furtive with my spiritual practices because
Mm.
I know I'm recovering in a spiritual program. This isn't optional, um, but I haven't always been in a supportive environment where uh, there's been plenty of space for me to pursue, an invitation for me to pursue my own spiritual practices. So
Mm. Mm.
I think I'm really fortunate to have people around me who create that space and give me that invitation. And
Yeah.
first and foremost, my lovely partner.
Yeah. Your beautiful partner,
Yes.
my beloved friend, right?
Yeah, you knew her first. I give up. You got priority. I get it, Granetta. Yeah.
Well, the hour has passed, right? It's like
Wow.
we don't, as we go
Wow.
on. And I didn't even, I want to get more into the music because I know you're a musician and I love music. So we talked a little bit about it, but we'll get to talk more because I know how much music means to you, right?
Oh, yes.
And and you've been I didn't know about the singing part, but I know now. I know you play instruments and you're in a band, and so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, what do you have any parting words you want to say before you go? Um,
Music brings it all together.
yeah, it sure
I think of
does.
you. I think of music. Um, I I have loved this hour. I can't believe it's been an hour. It feels like we just got started.
I know, right? We're about to get into some things,
And
right?
that's the way it always is with you. You and I, we have some shared experiences and some
Yeah,
magic that
yeah.
really always makes me want to go deep with you. And what an honor and a pleasure to be here. And
Well,
yeah, next
thank
time
you
we'll talk
so
about
much.
the music.
Yes, the music. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me tonight and to share and have this conversation.
Oh, thank you. And thanks to
Right.
all the listeners and people who are holding us up here. Really beautiful hour. I can't imagine a better way to spend my time. Thank you, girl.
Great. Thanks. Love you.
Love you. Grace and ease.
All right,
All
Grace.
right.
Thank you for joining me tonight on Conversations with Reverend G. And I'm here every Monday night, right here live on WEMS Radio. I will see you again next week. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. And remember, grace and ease. Live your best life with grace and ease. Have a great week.